Hi, this is Jay Horwitz with a very, very special edition of the Amazing Mets Alumni podcast. Um, it's my honor to have on this call Carol Gies, who's been a Met family, been a Mets fan for a long time. Carol and her three boys, Tommy, Bobby, and Ronnie, were at the 9/21 game against the Braves. Sue Lucci, now vice president with the Mets. Um, 20 years ago, Sue and Kevin McCarthy, her cohort, helped run the recovery area in the parking lot, helped get supplies down to ground zero. And two of the key members of 2001 team, John Franco and Todd Zeile. It was really hard to believe, guys, ladies, that 9/11 happened 20 years ago. And as we approach the 20th anniversary at 9/21, we play the Yankees at Citi Field. I just wondered, 20 years after, what are everybody's emotions now? So let me start with you, Sue, if I could. 20 years, what do you think your emotions are going to be that night when we play the Yankees?
It's going to be a whirlwind. Every year it is when we are at home. So being home on the September 11th this year is huge. And ironically, we're playing the Yankees. So I think that brings a little special meaning to it. I think there's going to be a lot of New Yorkers. And I think it's going to be a very emotional night. And I think for all of us, I know I speak for myself when I say this, that every year on this day, I remember the minutes from the time the first plane hit. And I relive that in my mind every year, and I try to do the same thing every year. So I'm sure Carol can relate to that more than anybody on this call.
100%.
Carol, your husband, Ronnie, was a fireman from Squad 288 in Manhasset.
Manhattan, yeah. 288 Maspeth, right?
Maspeth Road. I mean, we're gigantic Met fans. You've always found solace in going to Shea and to Citi Field. What made you come to that first night? Like 2 weeks after the attacks. What made you come there with your boys?
It was a discussion I had with the three boys. I wouldn't make the decision alone, and the three of them and myself decided that we were such huge Met fans, and Ronnie was, and we all just felt like that's where he thought we should be that night for the first game. The Mets, our favorite all-time team. It was a place we would go, whenever we were family and we had the chance to be there at that time at Shea Stadium. So it was just a tough decision, but a great decision.
Again, say that, all of Carol's sons went on to be firemen, was a great tribute to their father. Johnny, let me ask you, looking back, what do you remember most about that week after the attacks?
I just remember how the whole entire Met organization, from the front office to the ground crew to the office workers to my teammates and everyone else that's at Shea Stadium, had gotten involved in trying to help with the recovery efforts. Obviously, we were in the parking lot unloading tractor trailers after our workouts, and how everybody came together and everybody was pulling and everybody wanted to do the same thing, is try to help as much as we can. I know, speaking for myself, I know Todd feels the same way, that if we could have went down to ground zero and pick up rocks and things to help with the recovery, I think we would have been able to do that. And that's what I remember most about how everybody came together as one, during those tough times, New Yorkers, and come together as one big family to help each other.
Todd, I know you work in SNY now, and you walk to work every day. You walk right past ground zero on the way to work. As you make that walk every day, what do you get a flashback 20 years? What do you remember?
I get to see the building, and the pool is right outside the studio window, which is a great reminder. I think Johnny's right down here as well. I hear him yelling at me when I walk by once in a while from the streets. But every time you go past the pools, or you see Freedom Tower, or you're just in that general area, you have no choice but to kind of remember why it's built, what's the tribute for. And as a native California guy, Jay, obviously, as you well know, I think the way we unified as a team, the way we unified as a city, just the things that happened after 9/11 to watch the city sort of come together and have baseball at least be a small part of it is why I really feel like, the Mets of the 11 teams that I was with is the biggest part of my sort of baseball soul because of that experience in New York. We had the World Series the year before, followed by the recovery efforts after 9/11, and that just sort of solidified me as a New Yorker, even if it's New Yorker by transplant.
So let me ask you this: how did the recovery area start? We were in Pittsburgh. Could you walk me through like how this got set in motion and how it came to be?
Yes. We were at Shea Stadium when the first plane hit and then the second plane hit, and life as we know it changed. And we have a precinct, which we have one here at Citi Field, but we had one at Shea Stadium where there's actual police precinct. And they reached out to my boss at the time, Kevin McCarthy, and expressed the need to bring the wounded to Shea Stadium and have Shea Stadium as a triage center. So the first thing we did was we went up to the bathrooms throughout the ballpark because that's where we used to store the stretchers for when a fan was injured. That's where the EMS would grab the stretcher from. So we actually went through all the levels of the ballpark, collecting the stretchers from the bathrooms and bringing them down on the first aid scooter to help. And there was ambulances. There had to be at least 45 ambulances lined up in the parking lot getting ready to go down to ground zero to bring back the injured. And as we all know, as time went on, that changed. And the next call we got was they wanted to use Shea Stadium as a morgue to bring the bodies there to identify them. So it was constantly changing. And that was just within the first 12 hours of everything happening, when the reality was that there are no survivors. It's not an effort to rescue people anymore. And it was the harsh reality of it. And then eventually that changed to, we're not going to use Shea Stadium. They're going to use the tennis center because there's an ice rink there. And if you just think about what I just said, to think about that is just unbelievable. Something I never thought in my workplace would be something I was dealing with, but all of the world was dealing with. And Carol, my deepest regards for you. Sitting here talking and having someone who's lost a direct member, it is terrible. And thank you for your sacrifice and for your kids' sacrifice.
Thank you for all your efforts. Thank you.
Carol, let me ask you, go back. You always told me that when Mike hit the home run against the Braves, that was the first time that you and your family had smiled in a couple of days.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. Never thought I would see my boys smile. They were living such a horror. One of my sons put his fist through a door in the house and ran out of the house. None of them just clammed up and never talked. So when we went there, we sat quietly through the game. At the one point, Brian Jordan came over to me and put a little bit of a smile on my face. But when Mike Piazza hit that ball, to see my three sons jumping up and down, smiling and cheering, the only way I could describe it was like the light at the end of the tunnel was getting closer. I knew we were going to be able to move on a bit. It wasn't always going to be crying and tears and frustration and anger and all the other emotions that the three boys and I went through. They smiled. It was the most wonderful feeling as a mom to witness. It really
Carol,
was. Yes.
While you're talking, I was telling Jay prior to this call, and for anybody who's watching this podcast, I have an envelope full of newspaper clippings and things from 9/11. And because I was at the relief effort, I used to save the newspapers and read them later on. But I came across this, and this is probably going to strike a nerve, but I just want the people watching to see this. And this is Carol with her three sons in the stands on September 21st. And you can see the sorrow.
It's hanging on the wall in my house.
There you go. So
that was how we felt.
Yeah.
That was how we were pretty much all the time until that ball got hit. It was always the eyes down, the sad look, the holding one another. And, you know, it started out that we were waiting for recovery. We were waiting and waiting and waiting. I happened to go down to ground zero, and either Johnny or Todd said something about wanting to go down and lift the rocks and stuff. I did that. I went down with my community priest and my brother and some of the guys from my husband's company and lifted rocks and put them in a bucket to save, just to have something from there. That's what told me I was a widow. That was the first day I was ever able to even use that word, seeing that. And, you know, all along at my house, they were saying, oh, there's voids. You know, they're down there smoking cigarettes or drinking coffee and just waiting to be recovered. Yeah. Once I saw it and was part of it, it wasn't recovery anymore. It was, you know, finding them. And I was fortunate enough that Ronnie was found on December 7th. But
yeah. God bless you and the kids. Hey, Todd and Johnny, let me ask you this. What made that team, 2001 team, get it? You know, I mean, I've been in the game like you guys for a long time. And when a tragedy hits to a man, Todd and Johnny and all the other guys, there wasn't anything we didn't do. But what is it about the makeup of that team that we were able to do what we did back then? You, Johnny, who wants to go first?
Yeah, Todd, you go. I'll follow.
Well, I would say, Jay, that it's hard to measure what any team will do in a moment like that until that moment arises. So I don't know that we were special in any way until those circumstances arose, but I do know that we had, you know, our sort of heart and soul, and not just because he's on here, I've told you this before, but was sort of Johnny's New York spirit. And we knew that there was direct connectivity with Johnny. We knew that there was going to be things that he was going to have to go through that some of us from other parts of the country, even though we were a part of this sort of team and brotherhood, weren't going to have the same direct effect as Johnny. So I think that galvanized us a bit. I think Bobby V did a great job of making sure that we felt like we were needed. There was, because I think I've mentioned this before, that right after the attacks, I think my personal feeling was helplessness as much as anything. I think we didn't feel like, you know, a couple of baseball players had any right being in, you know, the area where there was grieving widows and kids and firefighters that were still trying to go in and find, you know, some remnants of their brothers.
Can I interrupt you a second, Todd?
Yeah, I was just going to say, but you guys made it. As soon as we saw the faces on the guys doing it, we knew that the Mets were sort of that. There was some reminder of something different, something better, something to get your mind away from it. And then I think we really felt galvanized as a team to try to do whatever we could to make some bit of difference. And yeah, so go ahead, Carol.
You guys made a tremendous difference, and I hope you guys never forget that. The New York Mets, Mike Piazza hit the ball, yes, but smiles on my children's face. But you all were just so, all that you did with the rescue and the stuff in the parking lot, seeing you at different events, coming to all the firehouses, was so tremendous for all of us. It gave us something to look forward to. You know, Jay would call me and say, listen, Carol, some of the guys, in fact, I think, Todd, you did come to 288, didn't you? Yeah. I thought so.
Yeah, I'm sure he did.
And he'd say, the guys are coming to 288. Why don't you and the boys come in? That could have been on a Tuesday. And we were so excited, looking forward to Thursday to see you guys. It was, you know, you guys were taking time out of your days away from your family to help us through the most horrific experience we could go through. So when you say it was a small part, it was a tremendous part of us healing. Tremendous.
Okay. Johnny, what do you got to say?
I mean, you know, just to echo off of Todd, you know, the guys knew I was born and raised in New York. Al from New Jersey. I had friends who were firemen that we lost in the building also. And, it was like a punch in the stomach to me. And just to try to do what I can do. To help out in any way. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And the picture I showed before was of John on the back of a truck with just regular people.
Yeah.
That's what I said. Regular people.
So, how did it work out with the players? How did you work with Bobby V to organize? I guess I remember we would work out in the mornings and go out there in the afternoons and spend all day or all night there. How did that setup work?
So, when the team came back from Pittsburgh, they came right to the parking lot and wanted to help. And, their job was to play baseball. So you guys still had to have batting practice and do stuff like that. But it was turned so that when the guys were doing batting practice, the guys that were coming from the city, the firefighters, the volunteers that had traveled from Toronto, Virginia, all came to Shea Stadium, to really live there for the week that we were doing it, the 10 days. These guys were out taking BP, but the volunteers and the firefighters all came out to the batting cage on the field and watched these guys stretch and work out. And as Carol said, it was huge. At first you're like, why would somebody want to go see somebody play baseball on the field when they're at the towers, digging? But it was their minds could get shut off for a few minutes, and it could have just been 5 minutes, but that's what these guys did. They brought relief, not in a form of doing stuff. They brought relief to the minds for the volunteers that were at Shea Stadium taking a break. And these guys were forever grateful that we're there. I had many volunteers tell me how great it was. And when that was over, the guys would go out, and I don't believe they changed their clothes. I'm pretty sure some of the pictures I have here, they're in the uniforms out in the parking lot helping lift boxes. And, they weren't bombarded for autographs. They were just another person standing next to the volunteers in the parking lot. And you don't think you'd ever see that, but everybody became one. It didn't matter what you did for a living. It didn't matter where you came from.
Exactly.
It was just a constant effort to help. And, Bobby V was running we had a whole section of clothing that we were trying to figure out how to sort. And I remember him taking charge of that whole area and managing it with a bunch of volunteers. So,
Hey, Johnny, talk a little bit about
Jay, I would tell you this, that and Todd would probably have my back on this, that every guy on that team, there wasn't one guy that said no that wanted to go out and not do their share. And we stood out there, like Sue said, we were in our uniforms and we didn't care what time. We lost track of time. We weren't there for an hour and then leave. We were there for hours. And that team, the closeness of that team, everybody was pulling for each other, but we were pulling for the city of New York because we felt that obviously playing for the Mets, we were part of New York City. And like I said earlier, we wanted to do as much as we can. And for those guys, like Todd is a California guy, and we had guys from Florida. New York was their home, and they made New York their home for that 6 months or whatever the season was. And we all became New Yorkers during that time. And for those guys, we'll always be connected and closeness, and we'll never forget each other because it was a brotherhood, just like the fire department and the police department have a brotherhood. This is our brotherhood, the 9/11 team that contribute so much. And I'm so proud to say that these guys are my teammates.
Yeah, I agree, John. John, talk a little bit about Rusty Staub. And you and Todd, I guess, you helped funnel this, that we donated a day salary to Rusty's foundation. You want to talk about how that came about, Police and Firemen's Widows Association?
Just went around. It was that's the least we could do. We just went around and we thought about what else can we do, and we decided to donate a day's salary. But I think the most important thing that we wanted to do was when we wore those hats representing the fire department, police department, all the emergency workers. And awesome. I remember that when we went to Pittsburgh right after that, and the commissioner's office said we couldn't wear those hats. And Todd was our player rep. And I remember to a man, he said that they were going to fine us, and we said, well, they can fine us. We're not taking the hats off. And Todd did a great job. I was the assistant rep, but I know Todd was on the phone and doing a great job. And Mr. Wilpon also jumped in to help out to make sure that we were wearing those hats. And we felt very proud to be wearing those hats for the rest of the season. And I still say today that they should allow the guys to wear those hats during the 9/11 every year.
Yeah. Todd, talk a little about it. He was so involved with that, about how the hat thing came about.
The hat thing just really came about from circumstance when we would do things as a team or individually. A lot of times we'd bring some sort of Mets, some sort of Mets memorabilia, something when we go to the firehouse. And we went down to ground zero, and I traded a hat for a hat. And it was a simple gesture at the time, but I wore it, I think, at one of the practices, and we just started talking about it. And all of us said, hey, I think it'd be great if we were able to wear these things. We ordered them and got hats from all the different, all the different rescue workers. And then, like Johnny said, when we got them, I got the memo because I was the player rep, and I ended up being the guy quoted because I was the player rep, but it was 100%. Everybody had the same feeling, which when they, the commissioner's office sent a memo saying that it doesn't fit with, the standard uniform protocol, and we're not allowed to wear the hats, and then kind of a cease and desist. And I think that just strengthened our conviction even more. And we said, I was the one quoted, but it was 100%. Like, if they don't think we're going to wear these hats, they can come down here and try and take them off our heads, I think is what was quoted. And that was the way we felt. And then it made it clear that it wasn't just the first game in Pittsburgh that we were wearing them. This was our hat for the rest of that season. And it was something that, I'll never forget. On the September 21 day is when all the rescue workers' families and rescue workers were lined up on the field prior to the game, and we had those hats. There was such a sense of connectivity and feeling of pride doing that I think that just made it worth every bit of whatever the heat we got, which was really ridiculous. And to Johnny's point, I think that'd be a great tribute to allow those hats to be worn every 9/11.
So Carol, do you remember about the ceremonies at all, with the singing and the bagpipes?
I do. The big flag, them marching out, the bagpipes, Liza Minnelli. I remember all of it. It's crazy how, as I'm getting older, the memory's getting really bad, but
tell me about it, Carol.
Really bad.
Tell me about it.
I could close my eyes now and still see some of the things from that day. It was magnificent. I don't think the Mets could have done it any better. It was respectful. It was a tribute to everybody. It was done with such class and grace and sympathy, I guess you could say. It was great. And I agree with Todd Zeile 100%. I think those hats should be worn every 9/11. It meant a lot seeing some of the guys with the FDNY hat on. I think they should be remembered on 9/11. And if the Mets are playing at home, yeah, they should have those hats on. They definitely should.
So what do you remember?
I think even for when they're not home, it's 9/11, What's the phrase? Never forget.
Correct.
So to me, by wearing those hats, you're not forgetting.
I think one of the leaders on that team should take charge, grow a pair, and say, hey, this is what we're doing. We're going to wear this no matter what.
Johnny, what I'm sorry, what looking back now, we get to the 20s, what's the one thing to remember about that day? Carol, you start, was it the home run, when you went home that night, what did you think about?
Everything. I remember the two teams shaking hands. The home run, sure, of course, absolutely. I remember the whole thing from the beginning, when you said everybody was marching out on the field and families were on the field and the music, just the every inning, watching the guys going on and off the field. Yeah, that hit was tremendous. I do remember that hit, but it wasn't just that I remembered. I remembered my kids getting there and not being themselves. You know, we used to go to the Met games, all smiles and, oh, can I have this? Can I have that? And this wasn't that again. This was, where are we sitting? We sat there, we waited. It was difficult because there were a lot of cameras on us for some ungodly reason. I don't know how they knew we were sitting where we were, but of course I had my husband's shirt on, which my children still tease me about. The whole thing, like I said, from the respect from the Atlanta Braves when Brian Jordan came over to me, to being asked to come into the dugout, and the whole thing, Jay, seeing you that night, just everything that night was just, it's such a fabulous memory to have, you know, from 11 days later, 10 days later, it went from, I'm never going to survive this. I can't do this alone. I don't want to do this alone. My children are never going to be the same, to, oh my God, look, they smiled. They got excited. They're talking about it. They're not just sitting there like zombies. It was a tremendous, tremendous day. And like I said, the Mets did that for me as a mom. It's something I will forever be grateful for, from Johnny to you, to Todd, to every one of you. It wasn't just the Mike Piazza thing. It was all of you.
Yeah. Amen. Sue, how about you? What's your fondest memory?
You know, as Carol was speaking, I was just thinking, when we got word that we were going back to playing baseball, I was livid. I did not want to play baseball. I wanted to stay in the parking lot and continue to help with the relief effort. And hearing Carol say that game was so important to her, and it brought smiles to her kids' faces, it changes the perspective of why we did play baseball. And I've learned that over the years, that we are a source of entertainment for folks. And I guess we kind of didn't just put the whole thing together. How are you going to play baseball? We just had towers crushed in the city by terrorists, and that's it. Life goes on, right? Whether good, bad, or indifferent, we have to get up every day and move forward. And I'm glad to hear that game meant that much to you. So as far as I was concerned, it was, I think I barely remember it because I was exhausted and I had hurt my back. And I was taking medication because I could barely move my arm. I pulled something in my shoulder from moving the pallet jacks around in the parking lot. But
Sue, I was taking a lot of medicine too. Probably not the same as you.
Yeah, I don't blame you. But as far as that day, you know, I remember pulling into the parking lot, and this is horrible to say, but this was a reality. The executive parking lot, where the official lot was at Shea, was shut at the moment, and there was cop cars everywhere. And it was because there was a bomb scare in the parking lot, because somebody left a backpack or something on the ground. So everything had stopped. I couldn't get into the parking lot. And that just shows you the alert that everybody was on.
Todd, how about you? Sorry, Sue.
That's okay. I was just going to say it was just an empty backpack. It wasn't a bomb, but that's the world we live in now since that day.
Todd, what do you remember most, Todd?
The day of, I remember, ironically, Sue, that I thought, okay, great, we're going to get back to playing. And mostly because I believed so much in the city, and everywhere we would go, people would talk to us and want to feel something different than what they were seeing every day in New York. And the rest of the world was starting to turn that page a little bit. Baseball had resumed. We'd played a couple of games already in Pittsburgh. And so I was excited to get back on the field. I wasn't nervous that it was going to be a target for another attack or anything like that, which was a big part of, what they were wondering about, whether they could secure a game in New York City and all those things. So I remember going to the ballpark, and I said this to Jay many times, but as soon as you get there, you realize this is not like any game you ever have been involved in before and not like one you'll ever be involved in again. This was one day that was going to be unique. And then we had no idea to know how that script was going to be written the way it was. And then how monumental I think that whole day played out. It was smooth. It was very patriotic. I think the moment of the game, aside from Mike's home run, that I remember as well as anything is Liza Minnelli. New York was so needed in that specific moment. And, you know, I was up in the tunnel and walked out down the tunnel with her and was just listening to her talk. And I was like, oh my gosh, is she going to be able to pull this off? And she went out there, the switch went on, and the way people reacted and then the chanting of USA, I thought, okay, we are definitely in the right place at the right time. And it didn't matter what the outcome of the game was. It didn't feel like baseball anymore. It just felt like something that I still get chills about.
I got goosebumps.
Being here today.
Yeah, me too. Just talking.
Me too, Todd. Johnny, how about you, my friend?
Well, you know, again, you know, coming back to play at Shea Stadium for the first game, wasn't sure, but if it was the right thing to do, you know, playing back here in the city. But when I got to the ballpark and seeing all the police presence and what was going on, I felt it was probably one of the safest places in the world to be at the time. But once the game started and when Mike hit that home run, just to see the smiles on the faces of the fans and like Carol said, her family, all the players in the dugout hugging, people crying in the stands, chanting the USA, Liza Minnelli. I thought it was like, you know, like a storybook ending. It was great. The one thing that I'll never forget was that, you know what, we pulled together. And I was so happy that we won the game to come out on top. And I think the Braves were probably happy that we won the game too. I think underneath they were all kind of pulling for us to win that game. So it was very important for us to get back and give back. But, you know, at that particular game, we put a small Band-Aid on a big wound. And for 3 hours, we put smiles on New Yorkers' face. And then after that 3 hours, everybody went back to taking the baby steps to recovery. And I think baseball was part of those baby steps to recover. And baseball played a big part in the recovery. And, you know, as we said earlier, that it meant to get sports back. And when the president and Mayor Giuliani said, let's get back to some normalcy, that's when we knew that we were taking the baby steps. But the one thing that I keep telling people is that just never forget about 9/11, because it's here forever and we will never forget that.
Let me say this. I've been in baseball 42 years, and, you know, I was fortunate enough to get a ring in 86. But for me, the highlight of my career, whatever it is to be associated with the 2001 team. I'm going to start to cry again, so forgive me. You know, a great group of guys rose to the occasion, and we really did a lot of good. I'm really very proud to be a small part of that team. And I just wanted to thank, you know, Carol, Sue, Johnny, and Todd for being a part of this. And like I said, never forget. And be a lot of memories on the 21st when we play the Yankees at Citi Field. And again, thank you all for being a part of this. It's my pleasure to have you on, and hope to see everybody soon.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Jay.
Nice guys.
Thanks, everybody.